Hi, welcome to our show, Dreamers and Doers. My name is Lisa Saunders. I'm the author of Mystic Seafarer's Trail, which I just revised because I met this phenomenal guest that we have today, Captain Bill Palmer, an actual shipwreck diver who loves history even more than I do. When I was younger, I was reading about these shipwrecks, and he was starting to think about diving them. His name is Captain Bill Palmer, and he is the author of The Last Battle of the Atlantic, The Sinking of the U-853. Captain Bill, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
I'm so excited. When did this book come out?
About 6 months ago.
About 6 months ago. And this has amazing pictures, and I understand you took many of them.
Most of which are mine, although my friend Bill Campbell has a few in there.
Mm-hmm. And so I saw some of your DVDs on the shipwrecks that you've divin? What do you do? What do you do on a shipwreck?
We dive on them.
Okay. How did you get interested in shipwreck diving? How did that even start?
I guess it's the curiosity of a child, staring at the water and wondering what's beneath it.
Mm-hmm. And so when did you start how did you learn how to dive?
Well, I lived on a lake in Connecticut, and I always sort of skin dove, in other words, mask fins and snorkel.
Okay.
And it wasn't until I got out of the Army and the state of Connecticut gave me X amount of dollars for being in during wartime that I was able to buy my first bit of dive gear.
Oh.
So armed with a book that I bought from Caldors for $1, I taught myself how to dive, threw on the equipment, and off I went.
Oh, you're kidding. You've never taken an official class? Aren't you supposed to get a license?
Well, later on. The thing was I had somewhat of a fear that they weren't going to fill my tanks any longer. So back then, which was like 1,000 years ago, myself and a couple of friends took a diving course.
Okay.
Which I never completed because they were going to take me for an open water dive on a shipwreck that I had dove numerous times before. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't until years later that friends of mine said, "Hey, look, we need somebody else to fill this certification class. Can I put your name down?" Sure, absolutely. So that's how that started.
Okay, and this book came about. Why you've done several wrecks. Why did you write about this particular German U-boat?
It's a story that I felt must be told. Mm-hmm. Few people realize that German U-boats roamed up and down our coast, and at the beginning, virtually unmolested. In 1942, the Germans came to the United States. They referred to it as Operation Drumbeat. Mm-hmm. They also called it the Happy Times because, again, like I just said, they roamed up and down our coast torpedoing ships at will. And we had no means of combating that. And, the sad thing is prior to this, an admiral by the name of Vest went to England to study anti-U-boat tactics. And what he did is he wrote down everything which was then sent back to Washington. Now we enter the war, so Vest is ordered back home. He goes to his office only to find that everything that he had sent back to the U.S. had been neatly stacked and filed away, and no one looked at it.
Wow.
And it was sort of crazy because the New York Times used to publish a list of ships that were sailing, and they had the cargoes of what they were carrying. Mm-hmm. So all a spy had to do was pick up a copy of the New York Times, radio the U-boat that we've got a tanker leaving at 10:15 this evening, followed by a freighter, and the U-boat would just sit offshore. And now our cities, being completely lit, silhouetted these ships against the background. So it was easy pickings.
Right. And how did this one go down?
This was the last U-boat sunk in World War II.
That's amazing.
And the sad thing is, it was sunk literally minutes before the war ended in Europe. Not Japan, but Europe. Mm-hmm. And it was a shame that these men gave their lives for a zero cause.
And you really, I feel like you've become friends with these men that perished because you've been to that dive, you said almost 1,000 times, countless is what you said.
Countless.
And you've seen their remains, now is that something that the German government wants to bring home, or do they consider that their grave, or how does that work?
You know, back X amount of years ago, the German government wanted nothing to do with anything that related to World War II. So when people had suggested recovering the remains, they said, leave them alone, which they should be. You know, you shouldn't take or touch another man's bones. I mean, this is his final resting place.
Right.
But unlike the U.S., where we go to great lengths to bring our people home,
right,
they didn't, and it was, you know, because of World War II and the atrocities that were committed.
Okay. Now, this one in particular interested me. It's a name tag. Can you tell me something about this name tag?
Sure.
You took off
You know, the funny thing is, I was working in my garage, and I had a little box of artifacts that I had yet to restore. And taking some of the artifacts out, there was this man's name, or I should say this boy's name.
We can put it so the camera can see. And his name, H. Kistner? How would you say that?
I'd say Kistner.
Okay.
So what I did was, having this name tag, I now went back into the house and opened my book. And I've got a complete list of the crew. So, in opening the book and scrolling down a few names, there he is, Heinrich Kistner, age 24. He was an Oberleutnant machinist with no equivalent U.S. rank. But the thing is that he was 24 years old.
Right.
You know, and he was following orders.
Well, you've done many wrecks. How many wrecks would you know the number? Because you brought with you a DVD, which I can't wait to show. It just gives you a tiny sampling of some of your dives. How many do you think you've done? How many different wrecks, if you had to count them?
100 plus.
100 plus.
You know,
mostly on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Should we go ahead and start the video, and then we could just talk as we're watching it? Okay. Sure. Look forward to seeing that, and then we can discuss some of the, you've done a lot on the East Coast, right?
Yeah, you know, when you become involved in wreck, I don't want to say wreck diving, it's actually wreck exploration.
Okay, now what is this going on here?
This is, it's a 4-minute tease. A few years ago, myself and my friend were trying to...
Is that I'm sorry, is that Watch Hill Light we just saw? Okay.
That's Watch Hill.
Uh-huh.
And it's a rough day at Watch Hill. What we were trying to do is put together a program for television. And we still are.
Right. Okay, so because you're a filmmaker.
Right.
Right. And so the films that I saw that you have available on your website, Rhode Island wreck diving, I was able to watch a lot of those wrecks, the Metis, the Larchmont, and you said we're going to see the Larchmont on this video right here, aren't we?
Yeah, towards the end.
Okay, and that's you. There you are.
And Billy One Fin, as we call him, because he jumped into the water one day, lost his fin, and all he can do is swim in circles.
Oh. So this is your crew.
Yeah.
There's Crazy Carol. This is great that you give everybody some fun names.
Well, you know, everyone gets a nickname. I call her Crazy Carol because I said she was crazy to be with me and put up with my nonsense.
Now, what was that? Is this a submarine?
That was a Type 7 U-boat.
Okay. Is that similar to the U-boat that you wrote about?
No.
Okay.
A 7 was about 50 feet smaller and didn't have as much endurance as a Type 9. This is Paul Coburn. He runs a dive shop in Wallingford.
Okay. And do you so you dive with him?
Yeah. Yep. New England Dive.
Is that the name of a club?
No, that's the name of his dive shop.
Oh, okay.
And what he does is he specializes in deep diving.
Now, I was really excited that I read in the paper about you that you were written about in the book Shadow Divers, because I love that book. That's the first time I ever really read a book on diving, and I don't remember your section of it. What did they talk to you about there?
Well, Richie and John, who were the prime characters in that book, came to my house to ask me how best or how they could identify the UH-69. There was a...
Now that's somebody going down to a conning tower?
That's me squeezing inside the conning tower.
Okay, wow. That was a squeeze.
Yeah. You know, the idea
and
is...
And which is this? Is this the U-853?
The 853.
That's what your book's about. Okay,
Yep.
so tell us what we're seeing.
Well, we've squoze inside, and now I'm dusting off the torpedo tube, which has a woman's name on it, probably the girlfriend of one of the sailors.
Really?
This is a torpedo that's in the after torpedo tube.
And what's that right there?
That's the very stern of the boat.
And it's that encrusted with things?
Oh, yeah. Anything that's down for any length of time is just completely overgrown. These are the diesel exhausts. And just behind that, are actually looking forward, is the 37 millimeter gun emplacement. See, in 43, the big gun was removed and replaced with all anti-aircraft guns. Now, just forward of the conning tower is a giant hole in the deck. You could drop a Volkswagen in it.
Is that how did it go down?
Depth charges.
Depth charges?
Yep. She was depth charged throughout the night and into the next day.
By Americans, I take
yes,
it.
by
okay. I'm sorry.
No,
Shark, I got scared.
By the Atherton, the Mulberry, and the Erickson.
And we just saw the remains of one of the
of the sailors. Mm-hmm. You know, and I put that in because that's the reality of war.
Right.
I mean, it's not a game.
Right.
You know, you look at these video games, you hit the reset button, you do it over again.
Right.
The end result is you're risking a man's life or a woman's life in combat, and it's not a game.
Now, what about you? Aren't you risking your life being a diver?
Life itself is a risk. But now this is the paddle wheel of the Larchmont, which was Rhode Island's greatest marine disaster. That was sunken on February the 11th, 1907 off Watch Hill.
And how did that happen?
She was in a collision with a coal schooner, the Harry Knowlton, in a blizzard. Mm-hmm. And it was a great loss of life. There were approximately between 100 to 300 people on board that night, and there were only 17 survivors.
And a lot of those bodies washed up frozen and encased in ice on Block Island, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. As a matter of fact, they were stacked like you would stack cordwood until they could be shipped back to the mainland. So, yeah, I mean, the sinking of the Larchmont was a very tragic occurrence. As a matter of fact, one man, according to the papers, cut his throat so that he wouldn't have to suffer. He knew he was going to die, so he cut his throat so he wouldn't prolong his suffering.
Oh, I can't imagine doing that.
No, neither can I. You know, to me, there's always hope. There's always a chance.
Now, the people that did survive, because there's a couple shipwrecks I'm getting a little confused on, people that did survive, they got into boats. I mean, they were poorly dressed, so some people managed to get into a lifeboat, but they were so poorly dressed that some of them actually died in the lifeboat, didn't they? Yeah, because I think they were in their pajamas and...
Yeah, I mean, it was I believe it was 10:55 p.m. It was 3 degrees below zero on the outside.
Wow.
And the ship, when she was struck, burst into flames. There was a boiler explosion. So she burst into flames. The captain lowered his boat, and he had them row around to the leeward side in the hopes of getting people. But he was, you know, it was blowing so hard that he was blown away.
Okay.
And he, thank God, was one of the survivors. He, the purser, and the quartermaster, because they were all together in the wheelhouse.
What happened to him after this sinking?
I believe it was less than, now he was 27 years old. He was the youngest skipper for the Joy Line. Mm-hmm. And less than a year later, his hair, mind you, at 27 years old, turned completely snow white. Mm-hmm. And that must have haunted him until the day he died.
Right.
He went on to, continue running vessels and so forth.
So he kept working.
Yeah, yeah.
How was his end? I mean, did he ever go down the ship, or did
No.
he just retire like anybody else?
Yeah, I guess he just retired and, died in bed.
All right. Now, what about the Metis? You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. The Metis, that's another wild story. She, left New York again in bad weather, and she was bound for Providence, Rhode Island. She had a full load of passengers as well as cargo, because steamers of that era, this was 1872, steamers of that era not only carried freight, but they carried passengers. And off Watch Hill again, she was rammed by the schooner Natty Cushing. Now, there wasn't much damage except to the bowsprit of the Natty Cushing, but on the Metis, they put a man, if you can envision this, thank God it was August and not the winter. They put a man overboard. I don't know how they did it. They must have lowered him over with a rope or hung him by his heels to ascertain what damage had been done.
Right.
He reported there was minimal damage, so they continued on to Providence.
That's sad.
Yeah, and then they started to realize that the boat was a little sluggish, so again, the captain sent a man down to check below decks. And when he got to where the propeller shafting is, or shaft alley, the water was flooding at a very, very rapid rate. So he reported to the captain that the boat was going down. And they turned due north and tried to head towards land, but it was too late.
What did you, when you explored the wreck of the Metis, what did you find?
Well, before that, the first officer, his name was William Palmer.
Oh, gosh, your name.
Yeah, so, I mean, it was
Wow.
no relationship, you know, and he wasn't a descendant either. But in exploring the Metis, you see, there isn't much left of her except for machinery. And the reason being is because the ship was made of wood, and we have worms in our water that during the summertime, when the water warms up, eat wood. So what you see is what's left of the machinery. There's a big steel propeller, a propeller shaft going up to the engine, and then forward of the engine is a boiler.
Now, did I see all that when I watched this video of yours, the Thunderfish video, Rhode Island wreck diving? I believe I saw all that.
Yep.
And the Larchmont, and I saw that, is that what you call it, a paddle wheel?
Paddle wheel.
You got some great shots there. I've watched it twice now. I loved it. That was really good. And I'm excited because now you brought me Thunderfish video, Last Battle, the sinking of the U-853. So I can't wait to watch that. My dad's going to be really excited to see that. He loved your book.
You know,
So,
it's history. It's our history.
yeah, and the way you tell it, you are a really good storyteller.
Thank
and
you.
the feeling that you have for these people. You know, you're not just interested in what you're finding on the bottom. I feel like you're sensing their souls among these objects.
See, there's two schools of thought. First of all, if you don't know the history, if you're a diver and you don't know the history of that particular vessel, then you might as well dive a rock because there's no difference. But yet, if you know the history of it, if you know the captain, the crew, what she was carrying, where she was going, the hardships they encountered, then it puts a whole new meaning, you know, into what you're doing. And I really don't. I consider myself and my associates as explorers and not necessarily as wreck divers.
Okay.
Which is, it's a very, very small community. And the people that actively do this, we all know one another from, you know, from going to these different wrecks and looking for them and finding them. We're actually archaeologists on a limited budget.
Right.
We're not funded by anybody
I
except
just hope
ourselves.
I can't wait till your films become a series. You're trying to get a series done, right?
Yeah.
For TV. I hope, I can't wait for that to I believe it's going to happen for you.
You know,
Exciting videos.
you know, the problem is a national company or a national program doesn't want to work with you unless they have worked with you before. You know, so what they want you to do, want me to do, is to work with a production company, but a production company has their own ideas.
And you are a production company.
Right.
And like I said, I thought it was really interesting what you did. Do you go around giving talks? Are you available if any group wants to contact you?
As a matter of fact, in January, I've got a class from Providence coming to the house.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, which is, you know, for kids, for veterans. I mean, I'll do anything.
Because you have a lot of these things that you've brought up at your house.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I want to come to your house too.
See, you know,
I want to see your stuff.
see, there's two different schools of thought, and you know, I don't know which is right. One school of thought is you should leave it there, you shouldn't touch it, but my philosophy is touch it, take it. The reason being, it's not going to be there.
Right.
You know, the sea will take it.
Now, military vessels, though, you're not allowed to, just to make that clear for
Right.
the audience. But
Right.
but others you are. But you can
well,
certainly take pictures of
yeah.
what you're seeing on the military ships,
Exactly.
but-
It used to be take anything you want, nobody cared. But because of, you know, politics, you know, and knowing the right person, you know, someone that was jealous of someone else, they got a law passed saying that it is now illegal to take anything from a military vessel, regardless of its sovereignty. So, I mean, if you had a gun on it, a Spanish galleon, whatever, it could be considered a military vessel.
Okay.
Which, you know, it's sort of a crime.
Because it's going to disintegrate and be lost.
Yeah. You know, like, for example, these U-boats are just rusting. And, you know, when does it become okay to take it? You know? Now, for example, a friend of mine went to court for years to dive the Monitor. And the Monitor was I don't know if you're familiar with that. You know, the first ironclad.
A little bit.
Yeah, they met at Hampton Roads, the Monitor and the Merrimack or the Virginia, and they battled it out and came to a draw. But we, the diving public, were not allowed to dive this. I mean, it was a national site, but yet it's in our waters. And this friend of mine went to court for 5 years to finally be granted permission to dive it. It's in deep water, and you certainly have to be experienced. But prior to that, the French dove it, the English dove it. So now that we had permission to dive it, we were not allowed to touch it. I mean, you could swim over it, you could look at it, don't touch it, okay? As a matter of fact, they would have a representative from NOAA who would look at you when you came out of the water to make sure you didn't have any rust on your suit. You know, which again, it's sort of crazy.
Right.
Friend of mine found a lantern, you know, off to the side of the wreck and said, hey, listen, I can bring this up for you. They said, no, don't touch it. But now, the following year, the Navy goes out. They spend $5 million to recover this lantern. And then, now mind you, you can't touch this wreck, but they blow the propeller off. Okay? From don't brush up against it to blowing the propeller off. And then a couple of years later, they salvaged the turret. Now, the turret was underneath the wreck, so it wasn't as though you just merely pushed it out into the sand. I mean, they blew the heck out of it getting the turret out. So it went from you can't touch it to we're going to touch it. You know, which again is, it seems a little stupid, seems a little unfair. But when we salvage an artifact, to me, it's the preservation of history.
Right.
And we go to great extremes to preserve these artifacts, if they're iron, if they're brass, if they're bronze, and then we share them with the public.
Now, is there any artifact that you've found on a dive that had particular meaning to you? Even if you didn't bring it up, but just something that really
hit you.
you.
It's difficult to say because, I mean, there's a lot of neat stuff that I was very fortunate to find. On the U-boat, I had found the bosun's whistle, you know, which is the whistle that they pipe you aboard with.
Right. So you're thinking how this bosun used this whistle.
Well, his name was scratched in it, and his name was Schmidt. And I've got a picture of this in the book as well.
Oh, great. Okay. I might have missed that picture. I'll go back and look for that.
The Black Point. I mean, the Black Point is the ship that the 853 sunk. And that's how we were alerted to the fact that she was in the area.
So she's sunk near them?
Yeah, 5 miles away. Excuse me. The Black Point is about maybe 2¼ miles southeast of Point Judith. The captain of the Black Point, Charles Pryor, great guy. He felt the war was over. And they had absolutely nothing to worry about. He said, we're going to sail so close to shore that even if we're torpedoed, we'll be able to step off the ship onto the beach.
Right.
So that's, you know, the thought that they had. Then at 1740 hours or 540 hours off Point Judith, he said all hell broke out. And he had stepped out onto the bridge of his boat to light a cigarette. And he said he doesn't know if he lit the darn thing or swallowed it. He said because immediately you could smell cordite, you know, like gunpowder. And the stern was literally blown off. And that sank immediately, and a naval gunner was catapulted from the stern to the bow section of the 853, and he later survived his wounds. Now, the the Black Point went down with 12 men. And the bow section continued for another quarter of a mile before it finally rolled over and sunk. And Pryor was a great storyteller. He said that he told the radio operator, "Let's go, we're sinking." And the radio operator took a book, laid it on the telegraph key to signal a continuous dash. And Pryor comes back to the wheelhouse and said, "Let's go, we're going down." So both him and the radio operator run down to the rail of the ship, and Ray Thal, the radio operator, says, "After you, sir." He says, No. He says, "After you." So Thal said, "No, after you." Pryor goes, "We're not going to stand there and do an Alphonse and Gaston. You know who's going to be the last one off this wagon." And with that, Thal stepped onto the raft, followed by Pryor. And the funny thing is, Pryor said to him, to the radio operator, he said, "Look," he said, "grab your most favorite possession, because we're going." So Thal grabbed this black case, and now they step onto the raft, and the raft is partially submerged. So each man that was on that raft was holding up, or took turns holding up, this black case. Now, when they finally got to shore, you know, the Coast Guard from Point Judith was there in a matter of minutes. When that rescued them, they were taken to Point Jude Life-Saving Station. And Pryor said to the radio operator, he says, "Sparks, what's in that black case?" Now he's thinking maybe it's top secret papers, you know, something that's significant to the war effort. And Ray Thal said, "Well, Skip, that's the typewriter that I just bought in Newport."
So you brought that. We only have about a minute left. I thought what's exciting about you is that people can actually go diving with you. You have a charter. Do you have two boats or one boat? I was a little confused.
Nope, I have one boat.
Okay, Thunderfish. Now, how come on your boat it looks like it's two words, Thunderfish, yet when I see it written, it's one word? Is it one word?
Nah, I think it was just a mistake in putting it on.
What?
Putting it on the stern. I think it's one word.
You think it's one word? Because when I wrote, revised my book to include you in it, I put it as two words because I saw the video, and then I read your book, and I thought, oh no, it was supposed to be one word. So you're going to yell at me that it's the two words?
Absolutely
okay. You
not.
seem relaxed. So you but if I revise it again, I should put Thunderfish as one word.
Yeah, I'd do that.
Okay. And so people can go with you. They can go fishing out on your boat, and your boat is docked at Mystic during the tourist season.
Yeah.
Right?
I ran out of Point Judith, and I still run out of Point Judith on occasion.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay. Or Mystic.
Yep.
Then. Okay. And they can get in touch with you. Here's your phone number. Here's your website. They can look up your different videos that you have on your website, and they can call you to go out. I noticed you can go in a cage if somebody wants to swim with the sharks. You stick them in a cage.
See, I love playing with sharks.
Okay, and they could fish or they can dive.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we're about out. Is there any? You have about 30 seconds left. What do you want us to know? And is there anything in particular?
This book is available.
Yes. Where is it available? You can tell us where it's available.
It's available. The Mystic Seaport is going to
keep it up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's going to be carrying it shortly. Bank Street Books in Mystic.
Bank Square Books.
Bank Square Books.
Yeah, in downtown Mystic.
Yeah.
They can write to you. They can also write to you for a book, and you'll send it to them.
Subbase New London.
Subbase New London. All right. Is it? Okay. Well, thank you so much. I was so excited to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on the show.